How you doing? My name is Bobby B. From the big city of Candler, coming out here to talk to you guys. How many people have any awareness or experience with past life stuff? One, okay, one. Really? Oh, I want to hear your story. All right. Oh, good. Okay. So that shows me which way to approach this. So I'm going to give you guys two ideas to walk away with tonight that you're going to work on if you choose to. The first one is, what if we have an energy field? We can accept that in what we do. What if there's energy in our field from a past life? I was watching everything I touch, every movie, book, podcast, comic, whatever I touch, everything refers to past lives. I can't get away from it. So I'm watching this webinar, a guy named who's doing something called energetic NLP. And in the middle of his talk, he's talking about energy fields and clearing energy. In the middle of it, he just goes, you have energy in your field from your past lives. And he's not a past life guy. I am. In fact, that's my Twitter handle, the past life guy. So it's like, oh, okay. It's accepted. So consider the fact that you have energy in your field from a past life. And if that's the case, then that would mean that we don't come into this life as a blank slate. So the modern science has it that babies are perfectly pure and open, and as they come in, they just download everything from their family, their society, from school, friends, everything else, and then they learn all these things that makes them become into an adult. But what if we're not a blank slate when we start, and we have all this, we come in with stuff to work on, kind of a preloaded software to the package that we're working on. So that's the idea that I'm working with. As a past life person, I always see a past life perspective on people's issues whenever they're talking. Whenever they come to me with things, it's like, yeah, that sounds like past lives. Yeah, that sounds like past lives. So the idea is that you can just acknowledge this. A lot of it's pretty much more of an emotional awareness of it. Sometimes you have to feel some of the strange things that we've gone through, some of the trials and tribulations. And that brings the stuff up to the surface, and then it releases you from having to keep repeating it over and over again. A lot of us there's, people talk about being stuck on the wheel of karma and having to repeat things over and over again. So I found an interesting quote when I was getting this up. This guy named Alistair McLeod, who must be cool because his website has him talking to Oprah. That's like, okay, he's obviously been stamped. Oh, all right. He was talking about, he had this great line about, I've often been asked why we don't remember our past lives. I argue that we do. We remember our past lives not consciously, but rather through fears, phobias, limiting beliefs, and other blocks, which are most often held in our body. That's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. So not only is the fact that we've got all these fears, phobias, limiting beliefs are there in our energy field, but he thinks that we hold them in our body and that we have to give them expression and release them that way. It's like, so I like him now. Oprah's right. He's good. He's cool. I think he's doing a good thing. So if we consider that we have this energy in our field, then by accessing it, we can release it. And Alistair's idea was you just remind your soul that was then, this is now. I don't need to deal with this. I don't need to take this on anymore. And once again, it's like, that's a great way to approach it. I've been working with past life stuff since late 70s when I got connected to some friends of mine in Dallas when I was working down there. And there was a guy the guy whose works inspires me, his name is William Swigart. He was in Florida, and he came up with something he called the awareness techniques, which was pretty radical at the time because he thought that we didn't have to be hypnotized to access all this information. So he published a couple of books in like the late 60s, and then was working out of Florida. And people of a certain age will appreciate this. Back then, we didn't have the internet, so the only way to get things out was he would put an ad in the back of a Fate magazine, which is still being published, in the classifieds, and you would send a stamped self-addressed envelope. Anybody here? Any remember? Yeah, okay. And so you would send a stamped self-addressed envelope to his address in Florida, and he would give away. So he gave away the instructions for how to do this work, and then he would mail it back to you, and then you would get to work on it by your own. So he basically made this open software back before that was a real thing. Now he claims to have distributed 10,000 copies of this that he mailed out all over the world. So I found little pockets. I was working with a pocket of people in Dallas, and then when I moved back to New York, there was a group. There was a woman I connected with that was working in Little Rock, Arkansas. William Schwager was in Florida. There was a group that took the paperwork, met him in Florida, went back to Australia and started the exact same thing, but they called it the Christos technique. And they had a kind of a big following for a while. So the work got out there from when he finally published the book in 1970, but he died in 1981. And when he died, his wife had 6 of their 11 children at home. So she was a little bit busy, so she didn't have time to really work with this. She and I thought it was going to go away. So, but when I started researching this, I realized that his work affected what was going on in the rest of the field. There were other people doing this work, mostly using hypnosis, like famously Brian Weiss would probably be the one, interestingly, who started in Florida also. And Brian Weiss was a psychotherapist, and he was working with people, hypnotizing them and trying to get them to get to the core. The whole idea with energy medicine, you want to get to the core issue, because it's not what happened to you today, it's what it's echoing from your childhood or something. And he was working with a woman whose issues were not cooperating. So he said, well, go back to the core issue of this. And she went back to ancient Egypt and started talking about this life that she had. And it completely blew his mind, and so much so that he worked for 10 years before he told anybody about the work he was doing, because he was so afraid. This was in the 70s. He was so afraid that they would take his license away and he wouldn't be able to have a job. So it was 10 years after doing all this work, and I think he had like hundreds of sessions by the time he published. Then he was willing to come out, and he's still working. He does, he's probably in his 80s now. He's working once a month doing trainings and one-day seminars. So he's still out there doing it. But he's using hypnosis. And my guy, Swigard, back in the day said, you don't need to be hypnotized. And that's my second takeaway. I don't think we need to be hypnotized to do this work anymore. In fact, we're going to do something in a little bit after I stop talking with the idea that maybe we can all access a happy past life that we've had. I've been doing this with my groups in Asheville for the last year and a half. This will be the first time outside the bubble. We'll see what it's like. And this is the perfect place to try it. So any questions so far? All right. So the idea is that if we don't need, there's another person that was doing this real interesting work named Dolores Cannon. If you've ever get a chance to see her on YouTube, it's great. She looks like everybody's grandmother if her grandmother grew up and moved back to Little Rock, Arkansas, except she's talking about the wildest stuff. I mean, she's just, she has 4 books channeling Nostradamus, or conversations with Nostradamus, and really interesting. But she was just doing hypnosis by herself for a while, and then same thing with Brian Weiss, stumbled on the past life work, put it aside to raise 4 daughters, and then when she was in her 40s, she started doing this again, and then put like 17 books out until she passed away in her mid-80s, just a couple of years ago. Real interesting woman, but she said, even she admits, she says, you don't have to use follow the pendulum or the shiny object anymore. It's just things changed from the time of the 60s when people started doing this to what we're doing now, which is basically the idea that we can take a positive emotion and use that as a bridge into a past life. So I realized that when somebody was going, you got to do group stuff, you got to do group work, and I don't know how to do group work. But I found this one technique. There's a guy named Roger Wolger who was doing this something that I'll show you guys tonight. The idea that our emotions can be a bridge into a past life, or an activity that I'm doing a workshop at a place called Crystal Visions at the end of the month, and we're doing. We've got a little bit more time. I'm also doing something called EFT, which is tapping on the energy meridians to help move the energy through. So we're doing a. I just got shifted. I keep working that side of the room. We have a little bit more time in that, so we do two past life. I call them mini dives because it's literally like a 10-minute thing where you can go in, get an awareness of what your past life experience is, but it's using the emotion as a way to get you into it, and then come back, and hopefully we'll turn the cameras off while we do that so nobody feels uncomfortable with it, and then we can talk about it, and the stories of people coming back have been great. But one of the things we do at the workshop is, the last one it was we did, what was the richest life you ever had previous to this one? To have it but it was also, so it wasn't just what it's like to have money. It's like, how did it work out for you? Because some people's money issues could be, I used to be like, for example, I don't do anything with a group that I haven't tried on myself. So I knew I was going to do the money thing with the group. So I can do this by myself. And like I say to people, it's a great spiritual tool, but not a great business plan, because you can totally do this on your own after a while. After you do a couple of practice sessions, you can just tune into it. And what we do is we'll put a bookmark into it. So if you want, you can revisit this on your own time. So I went back to see, okay, what was my most wealthy past life? And I saw myself I was a rich trader, Trader, not TRA, not trader. I was so loaded. I was literally eating off of gold plates and having people serve me, and I was also a crook, and I was such a jerk. It was painful to realize that I handled having money very badly. So much so, because I thought I was so smart, I thought that I could rip off these pirates that were helping me, because I had my above board business, and then I had my under the board business, and I was working with these people that were basically pirates. I mean, and so because I was so smart, I thought I could totally make them rip them off just like I do everybody else. So I'm leaving my place of business in my past life self. This is like in the 1600s, and a guy comes up behind me and slashes my throat, and I'm just laying there on the steps bleeding. And as I'm bleeding, he pulls the money purse out of my pocket and dumps the coins on me, just like a little notice, like just in case I didn't get the message. He wanted to make sure that. So I was just like, okay, I did not handle being wealthy then. I don't know if that's feeding into my life nowadays, but I promise I'd do better. I swear I can handle money much more now. But these are the kind of things. It's like we do have blocks that, like he referred to, limiting beliefs about that. It's like, okay, I don't think I can handle being rich again. I don't want to be a rich jerk, and I don't want to be. I treated my servants terribly. I knew what it felt like to not care, or to feel like the people that were serving me, that might have been starving, deserved the pennies I gave them, because if I didn't give them the pennies, and they'd have to do something else. But I felt totally justified eating off of gold plates and giving people pennies away. It was fascinating to know what it's like to be inside that mindset. This is not who I am now. It's maybe because I learned my lesson, I hope, but it was amazing to be inside something that's completely different. I've done 2 sessions in the last week and a half with women who both had experiences of being in male bodies, and one woman kept going, "I'm so big and strong." It was like she was just so aware of my fingers are so fat, and I'm just like, it was just she was able to tune into the awareness of being in a body of the opposite sex, and also being in it enough to know what the physicality of that feels like. It was great to watch. I hear the greatest stories. I love my job, absolutely. I hear the greatest stories from people, even when they're weird. It's like that's all the better as far as I'm concerned. So, but like what I learned from seeing that experience is that, okay, I know that I didn't handle money that way. There are other people that have phobias and fears. I was working with a woman. I was telling you about EFT, and I was showing her about EFT is really good for phobias because you're tapping on these energy meridian points on the body, and it helps to move energy through. And when the energy moves through, the negative emotions are behind those energy disruptions. And when the energy moves through, you can get rid of those bad feelings. And I asked her, she said she wanted to experience it. So I said, what's it like? And she said, well, I've got this fear of snakes. So I said, okay, great. Phobias are real easy to handle. So they call it tapping. So we're tapping on various body points. And she's telling me all about these fears about snakes. It's the way they move, the way they look, the feel of their skin. It's like, okay, we're moving all the energy around snakes. And then we get to a certain point, and we tap on this collarbone point, and I say, say your own words, see what's coming up. And she says, I feel like I'm surrounded by poisonous snakes. And she lives in Arizona, and I know that she doesn't have anything to do with poisonous snakes. So I thought, this is a past life that she's experiencing. So once again, using the emotion as a bridge, we use that negative emotion to get her into a past life. And she saw herself being held up by these two big guys about to be thrown into a pit of snakes. Now, the idea is to get people to release the energy that's stuck. You don't want to re-traumatize. She didn't have to experience being bitten by snakes, but she knew that was going on. So the work I do is called running past lives. The guy that invented it worked in the film business. So the idea is like you're running a film strip. You can fast forward, you can freeze frame it, you can go backwards. So while you're running it, I said, well, let's go back to how did you get into this situation? Because she was like right there about to die. So she went back, and like 5 minutes before, she was a servant girl at a giant outdoor dinner, and she's pouring wine. She's the wine girl. She's just a slave. And she is going around filling up all the goblets. Again, the rich poor thing is going on. And she goes to pour wine to the big kahuna, who's, I see Boba Fett or, Jabba the Hutt or somebody like that, just big eye. And she accidentally spills wine on his sleeve. And he just goes like this with one hand. And two guys come and pick her up and throw her into this, that's how they get rid of the help in those days. That was the fireman, no HR department. So it wasn't just for her, the phobia and the fear of snakes was actually covering up all these things about, I don't have any value, I can be totally replaced. These people don't care anything about who I am, or they don't care nothing about my well-being. I'm just totally worthless to these people. And that's the kind of thing that carries over. That's the kind of phobia that sticks with you. Interestingly, it's this, spoiler alert, if you've ever been in a past life, you died. And then it's the energy that's going on in your body right before you die that tends to move over to the next life. Those are the things. So if we're not a blank slate when we're a baby, those are the things that you come in with. Like she came in with this, she read it as fear of snakes, but it was like, okay, some people aren't going to think that I have any. Yes, dispensable. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So hopefully she got past that, because she saw it, and it was also a very emotional experience to her, which it usually is when we're doing this work. So these are the kind of things that you come up with. These are the kind of great stories I hear. I was not expecting to start off with looking at snakes and finding out this whole thing about being dispensable, but that's where it goes. You just don't always know where we're gonna be when we get there. So how about we try something here? So there is an idea that we've all had a past life. Okay, so we're going to play the what if game. What if we've all had a past life? We've been in different bodies in a different place at a different time. And somewhere on this planet, we had this life. And somewhere on this planet, we had a life that was really happy. And we were fulfilled. We were, whatever it was, there's a lot of different ways we can be. It can be who we are, where we are, what we do, who we're with, or just people that, some people have a spiritual connection that makes them very happy. Let's go see what that's like. Everybody up for it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I've never had anyone this young to work with. Are you okay with her doing? Oh, are you okay with her doing?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I wouldn't do it without her parent present, but that's cool. I've worked with 15 and 16-year-olds. That was the youngest. How old are you?
Right now I'm going to be turning in November. Well, he didn't ask for my birthday, but 10.
10. Okay, 10 is good. All right. Good. All right, I've never worked with somebody that's 10 years old. Okay. So there's only 2 rules to doing this. And the first one is, it's basically a guided visualization. So if you get into a situation, you kind of have to trust the first image.